Port Charles thrives on secrets, but every secret has a heartbeat, the quickened pulse of someone who's about to lose control. In the wake of the Five Poppies operation, that pulse thunders through three converging arcs, a chief of detectives determined to pry open a sealed box, a brilliant doctor cornered by her past, and a strategist who refuses to accept that the truth can be contained. The city's facade, charity galas, brisk morning coffees at the docks, quiet promises exchanged in hospital corridors, cannot muffle the sound of gears grinding toward reckoning. By night, the shadows lengthen around WSB files and half-buried names. By morning, the consequences arrive with the precision of a lab result, undeniable, and often devastating. Anna Devane understands the cost of a closed file better than anyone. Bureau procedure teaches patience, but experience has taught her something colder: patience without leverage is surrender. That's why she summons Britt to her office without ceremony, closing the door on the hum of the station and the gossip that trails investigators like static. The room itself is a study in containment: locked cabinet, heavy blinds, the soft click of a recorder that is not officially on, and it turns Britt's composure into a test pattern. Anna's questions are methodical but pointed, shaped by the suspicion that the Five Poppies case didn't end when the headlines did. She believes the operation is the skeleton key to a dozen unsolved puzzles, and she also believes the key was cut years ago by men who preferred to sign their work in the dark. Britt arrives prepared to be the smartest person in the room, but Anna doesn't play to that ego. She plays to the part of Britt that is already tired of holding other people's crimes together with medical tape. The doctor's posture, hands folded, shoulders square, should signal calm. Instead it broadcasts denial. Anna notices every flicker. The way Britt's eyes dart when the conversation glances off her father's legacy, the way she demands evidence as if proof alone could absolve participation. That word hangs between them like an four drip, slow but relentless. Evidence of what? Of a connection. Between now and then. Between the clinic and the warehouse. Between fathers and daughters who inherit more than names. The power balance in the office shifts with each new detail Anna places on the desk: shipping schedules that don't line up with the official timeline, a requisition form signed by a dead handler, a coded memo that reads like a confession to anyone fluent in WSB shorthand. None of it explicitly brands Britt as a conspirator, and yet every page narrows the corridor she can walk without touching the walls. Anna doesn't accuse. She simply asks questions in the order that makes lies the least comfortable option. What did Britt see the night the supply chain rerouted through the harbor? Who called in the requisition for restricted sedatives, drugs too specialized for routine care, perfect for immobilizing a witness? How did an unauthorized biometric key override a firewall designed to resist state actors? Each question is a pressure point, each non-answer adds weight to the conclusion that someone used Britt's proximity to science to launder violence as medicine. Britt is no fool, and she refuses to be the final link in a chain she didn't forge. She knows the Five Poppies file bears the greasy fingerprints of old enemies and outdated loyalties. Still, the mention of her father fractures her practiced detachment. The legacy she carries is not gentle. She has spent years rejecting it through excellence, saving lives as an argument against bloodlines, yet biology has a way of contaminating reputations. Did he design the protocols that became this case's playbook? Did he build a system of compliance so elegant that it runs itself long after the architect is gone? Britt cannot say without admitting she has studied the algorithms more closely than she should. She cannot deny without conceding that someone with access to her world weaponized its precision. The result is a doctor on a tightrope: preserve the integrity of her oath, and she risks exposure; collaborate with the detective, and she risks becoming a footnote in the Bureau's victory speech. For Anna, the personal and the professional have merged into a single imperative: prevent more damage than the truth will cause. She suspects Brennan, restless, persuasive, allergic to transparency, knows pieces of the story the Bureau would prefer to forget. He has a talent for assembling coalitions out of people's fears, and if he believes the Five Poppies skeleton still has flesh on it, he will find the person who can identify the body. Which is why Anna's questions don't stop at what happened, they probe who profits from the confusion. If the case is an engine, someone is still turning the crank. If it's a storm, someone is steering the clouds. And if it's a myth, it's a remarkably productive one, capable of making smart people do foolish, irreversible things. Brennan, for his part, despises second-hand truths. He watches Port Charles' posture and he hears the echo of 1,000 assurances, none of which he trusts. The investigation has taught him that silence is not the absence of information, it's information with a lawyer. So he starts where silence feels safest, at the edge of a life that was supposed to be over. Nathan West's name surfaces like a buoy in a churning sea, and Brennan swims toward it with the urgency of a man who believes time is a weapon. If Nathan has knowledge of the original operation, or of the people who latched onto it for their own purposes, now is when that knowledge must be beyond corruption. Brennan carries that urgency into every room, into every conversation he frames as a courtesy and conducts like a deposition. The encounter with Nathan is notable not for theatrics but for its lack of them. Brennan does not threaten. He does not plead. He simply aligns the facts on the table and asks Nathan to choose between the version of events the city prefers and the version that will keep the city safe. If Nathan came close to the machinery of the 5 poppies, if he brushed against the money that moved through cutouts and the directives that arrived without signatures, then his silence is not neutrality, it is acceleration. Brennan's argument strips away the romance of heroism and leaves only risk calculations. Speak now, and control the blast radius. Stay quiet, and accept responsibility for everything the next explosion destroys. Nathan did not ask to become a repository for unresolved history, yet here he is, forced to weigh memory against consequence. He remembers faces without names and safe houses disguised as ordinary apartments, remembers a lullaby of coded phrases that sounded harmless until people began to vanish. He recognizes the psychology of operations that never die, only molt. What was once about disrupting a network becomes about managing the narrative. What once required a badge becomes an enterprise powered by shame. In this frame, Nathan's testimony is both shield and sword. It can protect those who acted in good faith and slice through the altered timelines that have kept the guilty in daylight. But testimony is also an admission of proximity, and proximity is the currency of blame. He knows that if he speaks, he steps into a line of fire that does not care about intent. Back at the precinct, Anna senses Brennan's parallel pursuit the way sailors sense storms before instruments do. She doesn't need confirmation to prepare for collision. Her next move is calibrated for containment and clarity, isolate the variables, identify the leverage, shorten the distance between question and verifiable answer. She re-examines patterns that looked benign when she was still giving the Bureau the benefit of the doubt. A procurement officer no one can find. A courier who changed phone numbers the day after a transfer went bad. A security video from the clinic that never made it into evidence because someone labeled it medical privacy and hoped the ethical trap would deter further scrutiny. Each recovery peels back a layer of policy and reveals the raw truth beneath. The case didn't go cold, it was refrigerated. Britt feels the temperature drop, too. She returns to the hospital and discovers how quickly rumors become diagnoses. Colleagues smile a little too tightly. A compliance officer asks for access logs she's never been asked to surrender. A patient's family requests reassignment, citing comfort, not accusation, which somehow feels worse. She retreats to her lab for sanctuary and finds only mirrors, proof that the systems she oversees can be subverted by someone who understands them, perhaps by someone who cares too much about making things work to notice when they're being used for something else. When Anna's card appears under her microscope, metaphorically speaking, Britt realizes that cooperation might be the only way to make intent visible again. Not to confess to crimes she did not commit, but to rescue the science from the men who perverted it. The city's equilibrium depends on people renegotiating who they are under pressure. Brennan cannot afford to be merely curious, he must be relentless. Anna cannot afford to be merely correct, she must be effective. Britt cannot afford to be merely innocent, she must be useful. And Nathan, steady, principled, no longer sheltered by the illusion that the past is inert, cannot afford to be merely brave, he must be exact. Each of them navigates a personal calculus: how much of myself do I trade to secure the outcome I claim to want? The arithmetic is brutal, and its solution will live in the space between an affidavit and a heartbeat. When the lines finally cross, it won't be in a courtroom or at a press conference. It will be in a room much like Anna's office, a confined space where words matter because they will trigger actions within minutes, not months. The evidence Anna assembled will meet the memories Brennan extracted. The systems Britt can decode will meet the questions Nathan can answer. And the 5 poppies operation, stripped of the poetry that protected it, will look like what it always was, a design for turning fear into leverage. Some names will be cleared, some reputations ruined, and at least one door will remain closed to remind everyone that victory in Port Charles is always provisional. In the end, the question was never whether the truth existed, it was whether the right people would recognize it in time to stop the next iteration. Anna wagers her credibility. Britt wagers her career. Brennan wagers his safety. Nathan wagers his peace. The city holds its breath as if oxygen were the commodity at stake, and perhaps it is, because the air feels different when evasions lose their polish. Port Charles has survived conspiracies before, but survival is not the same as healing. Healing requires the kind of confession that doesn't fit neatly into a file. It requires people who once operated at cross purposes to align, if only for a moment, around the most unfashionable belief in town, that facts, assembled without favor, can still defeat the kind of power that prefers the dark. Until then, the heartbeat continues, sometimes steady, sometimes stuttering, marking time between revelation and consequence. Somewhere on the waterfront, a phone vibrates with a message that will decide whether a witness sleeps or runs. Somewhere in the hospital, a monitor beeps a rhythm that reminds Britt why she chose medicine in the first place. Somewhere in the precinct, Anna rewrites a strategy on a whiteboard no one else is allowed to see. And somewhere just beyond the circle of light, Brennan watches, waiting for the moment when the city admits what he already knows, the 5 poppies never ended. It only learned to bloom in the shadows, and every bloom, no matter how carefully hidden, leaves pollen behind for the patient to find.